The comments of Stewart Mandel, he was talking about the cancellation of spring games. And this, of course, was branching off of the fact that the Huskers have replaced the spring game with the Husker games, which I guess if you do think about it, the fact that it starts with an H and ends with games does make you think that maybe they were shooting for the Hunger Games.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's called the Husker Games. It's a day long of activities. There's a garage sale. There's probably face painting for the kids. Food trucks will be there. They're going to charge a lot of money to go watch some exhibition volleyball. Good times had by all. Mm-hmm. But Stewart Mandel, in his mailbag, arguing that, these coaches are so paranoid because, as Matt Rhule pointed out a couple of press events ago, that, we had guys getting poached off our team because of what other teams saw from our spring game. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that immediately, in the world of paranoid coaches, was just, oh, my God. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Hard to argue.
And as we know, the poaching is happening everywhere. Everybody's doing it, mm-hmm. and everybody's being aggressive with it. Mm-hmm. And there is some common sense there that, well, here's a chance to actually see someone perform in a game. But as Mandel points out, Dabo Swinney, who has not canceled Clemson's spring game and will play it, says whether you have a spring game or not, there's going to be tampering. And so Mandel is backing that up by saying, so why are we taking away this tradition that really has been done for the fans? It's not really done for the players. The coaches have openly admitted, hey, we don't go all out in our spring games. We don't show everything we can in our spring games. That's saved for the scrimmages we have in the spring that are closed, where people can't see our secrets or, watch some of the things that we're working on. The spring game, though, is an event for the fans. And so why are we canceling these events for the fans in the name of paranoia?
So before we get into the Matt Rhule of it all, I would say this. I think the answer to that question of why are we canceling them is because fans seem to be okay with it. Or at the very least are going along with party lines, and thus they are pretending to be okay with it in the name of their coach saying it. Just like if Nebraska, because we've seen this a million times around here, Nebraska has a coach, he says it one way, and all the sycophants are like, this is what we got to do. The next coach comes in, completely changes it, and they say, man, that former coach was wrong. We got to follow the new guy. And I thought that showed itself, quite a bit over the last however many years.
And, it's funny because when we did the poll question and we talked about the cancellation of the spring game,
we got no pushback, right?
We got no pushback. And the interpretation was, well, that's because people just don't care about these events.
See, now and
I didn't think about it from the sycophant side of things, where it's
coach says it goes.
If popular coach says X, then X must be true, and we must follow X.
Now, I think that plays a large part in it, certainly with the Tennessee stuff. Now, let's push that off to the side and focus more on the spring game for a moment. I do think, though, that there has been an erosion of interest in spring games. I think that is inarguable. I think of how I used to take in the game, not that I am the arbiter of fandom, but how I took in the game in 2008 and how I take in the game now. And I do feel like I'm a median enjoyer, or lack thereof, of the spring game. I used to adore that thing because it was an opportunity to watch players. Now, I was a sicko who loved knowing the whole roster and who's the third string quarterback. Let me get a little tape on Travis Washington. Like, I cared about that stuff. I don't anymore for whatever reason, but I think that I was that person. That changed. I think a lot of people have changed. Now, I would push back against that argument, say the thing was still getting 50, 60, whatever thousand people there.
North of 70,000
So as much as we say, interest has waned in it. If we came on the radio on the Monday after, there was nowhere near the level of interest that there used to be. No. I don't think that is arguable. But people were still showing up in the tens of thousands. So, I'm trying to wrestle that with people don't care, but they obviously did to a degree.
They don't care.
I definitely think it's waned, though. So I think that did play a large part in. No one around here was mad at Matt Rhule. But how much of that was coach says it goes versus how much of it was something else?
Now, again, from my own personal edification, dropping the spring game, fine with me. Because honestly, because I think we tried to put too much into the spring game in terms of, well, we saw this guy perform well. Man, he's going to have a big next season. We've had so many spring game heroes over the years who went crazy in a spring game and then never really turned into much of anything. So from that standpoint, am I heartbroken that it's gone? No.
Hell no.
And Mandel does make an interesting point regarding, hey, these things were out there for the fans, and now we're canceling these things because of paranoia. And it kind of goes back to something I mentioned in passing, was we went to break a couple weeks ago. Is there any sport out there that's trying to do more to make you dislike it than college football?
Yeah.
It's almost like they're actively trying to make you not like it.
With decisions. If you were someone who actually
like an abusive boyfriend, you just can't let go.
Yeah, if you really did like the spring game, and this was the only time that you could actually take your family of 4 or 5, 6, whatever, to a game and go through the process of a traditional Saturday, I feel for you, because this is gone and nobody seems to care. What's funny is in the olden days, before the games were on TV, the coaches, and Callahan and Bo did this, if I remember right, they were like, we don't want the game on TV because we don't want the opponents to study our plays. But now that is flipped. It's not study the plays, because we all know it's going to be vanilla anyway. It's we don't want the opponents to study our roster. Mm-hmm. So there's always been excuses where I think that coaches now have more freedom to get rid of these now versus then. Well, I guess what is the difference as a society? Like, if a coach would have tried to cancel this thing 20 years ago, there would have been a revolt around here. Bo Pelini, I was a part of this. Bo Pelini canceled one because of a tornado, and they didn't reschedule it, and I was actively mad at him for not resuming a stupid game. And I was like, they need the extra practice. Like, I believed that in my heart of hearts in 2012. And today, again, it's a shoulder shrug. Why have we as a society, though, why are we okay with the lack of a game, with the lack of something for us as fans? And I mean, then you could dovetail this into the Tennessee discussion, where, like, on one hand, again, I'll be sympathetic. Josh, I want wins. I want to get rid of the Tennessee game. I want wins. Okay, I understand it, even if I disagree. But it also stinks that you're missing out on a big home game. Because I remember when I was in college, I got my season tickets, and it was always like the years where you had the hated rivals or the big non-conference game. You were always more excited for that than you were the other years. You were always more, Oklahoma comes down. Thank God Oklahoma's on the home schedule, Like, it's wild.
So that leads into the quote directly targeted at Matt Rhule by Stewart Mandel from his mailbag. He said, I have a particular bone to pick with Matt Rhule, whose 12-13 record in his first 2 seasons at Nebraska has apparently turned him into the arbiter of all things college football. First, he touched off the spring game revolt, and then, after Nebraska canceled its upcoming home with Tennessee, went on Urban Meyer's podcast and said, why would you ever play one of those games? And if you remember back to when Rhule was on that podcast, he prefaced the answer by saying, I bet this is my 4th job. I got fired from the NFL. I'm at the point in my life where I don't care what people think.
He really was doing the show bit.
And is willing to say whatever.
Yep.
So is Matt Rhule, is he trying to be the arbiter of all things college football?
Let me ask you this. If Matt Rhule's record is better, do you think that Mandel has this opinion?
See, and this has been
reminds you of COVID, doesn't it?
This was a subject it really triggered me when people were pissed off at Scott Frost in Nebraska for wanting to play football when the rest of the Big Ten did not. And one of the justifications used was, you're not good enough, so your opinion doesn't matter, which is an asinine opinion because you're in the sport. You want to play. That opinion matters. It doesn't matter what your record is.
And to be
just because you win, there's a lot of coaches over the years that have won, but it doesn't mean that they should be the arbiter of all things college football.
So it's funny.
It shouldn't be based on your record necessarily.
So I've obviously been very critical of Matt Rhule throughout this entire process. I never have I once said, you're 12-13, shut up. It's more, I just don't like the decisions that he is ultimately making. But Matt Rhule, so again, to be fair to Matt Rhule, I don't believe Matt Rhule has ever asked for his opinion to be the one that is shaping the sport right now. It is interesting.
He's just the one willing to say it.
Yes. And that others are following. That other schools, they were the first, right, to cancel the spring game of the schools that were not doing or that were doing spring games. Because like Iowa had.
I thought right? Didn't USC cancel first? I don't
Maybe
think
you're
Nebraska
right. But
canceled first.
If USC did, they definitely didn't speak on it.
No, this was.
I don't recall Lane Kiffin's.
Rhule is the first one to come out and actually say, "Hey, they're poaching people off our rosters because of this."
And then I don't believe Lincoln Riley and USC or Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin ever spoke on any of their non-conference scheduling, hiccups over the last few years when they have been trying to get out of games as well.
Correct.
Whereas Matt Rhule, I'll give him credit. Because a lot of people that day when that news came out, it was all about money. It's about money. And I said, hell no, it's not. And then people argued. And then what does Matt Rhule say? And I haven't heard from any of these people saying, wow, crap, John and Josh were right about this. It actually wasn't about money. I'll give him credit for saying it. Again, I don't think he's trying to lead the sport into some enlightened area. This is just how he wants to operate with his program.
Well, he's saying the things that have already been discussed behind the scenes.
Definitely.
Other coaches probably have these exact same opinions.
Yeah.
They either haven't been willing to say it or been asked about it, or let's face it, Matt Rhule, there's not many microphones Matt Rhule won't turn down.
He's very available.
He is very available. And that's not being critical, by the way. So please don't read that into Matt Rhule talks too much. No. I'm never going to say that about a coach.
I like it that he talks as much as he does, even if I disagree with him. It's a positive.
Because it gives us content.
It does. Look at all the things we've been able to talk about.
And we get to hear him, and we get to hear someone openly opine about the nature of their sport or their team or whatever the case may be.
100%.
Now, if the results don't back themselves up, Matt Rhule is not going to get hired or fired based on did he talk too much or did he not talk too much.
Yeah.
It's going to be about whether or not he won football games.
100%.
And how he won football games. So it is interesting that he's now kind of becoming a touchstone for these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
Because Nebraska did not invent the ducking harder non-conference opponents to get more wins on the schedule.
No,
they are not the inventor of that tactic.
And they won't be the last.
But they're the most recent example, and their coach has been willing to come right out and say it. Yeah, we're not scheduling these games because we already play 9 power conference games a year. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
Now, again, philosophically, I don't like it, and it's not just because Matt Rhule is doing it or Nebraska is doing it. It's because everybody is doing it.
Yeah. It's just that he's the coach that we cover the most.
He's the coach we cover the most.
Yeah. And again,
but I'm just as critical of Ole Miss or Tennessee or Florida State or any of these other power conference schools back out of a non-conference game because that means less good content for us.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see good on good.
Yeah.
And we'd like to, especially when it comes to non-conference games.
Yeah, I just think another reason why there hasn't been the maybe freak out with the spring games is it just seems like they have run their course. I think that they were so big. It came out of nowhere how it was like, wow, people care about spring games. And there was, of course, the pride in the attendance, right?
Sure.
Ohio State has this many fans and Alabama has this many fans and Nebraska has this many fans. And it was always, especially around here, because Alabama has only had 2 coaches now going back almost 20 years. Around here, it was always a great introduction to the coach. Bill Callahan, that was the one who kicked it off. Everyone's excited for the Bo Pelini era. After that, Mike Riley, it's not as interested, but there's still a large crowd for his first one. And Tristan Gebbia and quarterback battles. And, of course, Scott Frost and everything that he meant. And then Matt Rhule. And, a quarterback battle, a Sam Keller versus a Joe Gans. Seeing a Dylan Raiola. Seeing an Adrian Martinez. Like, that stuff in previous eras was really massive. That said, there was this text, too. And I think this hits along the lines of running its course. A text from the 402, fans are now more okay with the spring game being gone because of social media. They have more exposure to the team year-round, not just during the 11 to 12 game season. And I wonder how much of that plays a part in it, too, where it's like you can watch some of your videos on YouTube or whatever, the behind-the-scenes stuff. I know when I was growing up,
but you can't watch them play a football game or at least something
that's fair.
That is similar to a football game.
But that I ate that stuff up. I would if I am a 17-year-old Husker fan today, and I'm seeing all that video. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have been awesome. I didn't have that back then.
It would have been, but keep this in mind. All of that is controlled. you're not seeing anything you shouldn't see.
100%.
At least with the spring game, there was the potential, if someone made a mistake or someone got hurt or whatever the case may be. I mean, it was out in the open. It was uncontrolled to a degree. The stuff that you see coming from the in-house video departments or the social media departments is all the message they want you to see. So just remember that as you, oh, wow, here's another piece of video. Here's another inside look. No, it's the inside look that they want you to have.
And that's why I don't watch them, and it's just not as interesting to me today as it would have been, however many years ago.
Oh, yeah. Just really it's just like everything else. Once you've innovated once you've created the innovation, it gets more pale by the example. I mean, reality TV.
Well, yeah. People used to.
You watch The Survivors, you watch The Real Worlds and stuff like that.
Same thing again and again.
And then it's just the same thing, just in a different package, and it all starts to look the same.
It's how I feel about Hard Knocks. I used to love Hard Knocks. Don't care about it anymore.
Same thing. Yeah.
I used to watch every episode, and then I would watch some episodes, and now I don't watch any episodes.
Yeah,
I'll see a couple clips here and there online, but otherwise, I think my interest in that type of show has run its course. So I think that this was natural to happen with spring games. It's just that Matt Rhule and other schools are taking the plunge because they know that the pushback is not going to be there, again, for whatever reason. Matt Rhule has been able to do a lot of stuff over the last few years that predecessors, man, it is so interesting how, Riley would push back against the olden ways, or Callahan would push back. Hell, even Bo. I know that sometimes I felt like I was on my own with the frustration of how he handled the black shirts, but there were people that disliked that. They didn't like what he was doing because it went against tradition. Matt Rhule and Troy Dannon, I would say, they have a lot more leeway with the fans. And I think it goes back to, what Matthew says on YouTube, wins on the field, only thing that matters for 2025. I think that after so many arguments around this place for years and years and years about this and this and this and this and this, people just want the team to win, and they don't really care as much how it happens. Is a spring game going to change them winning? No. And everybody knows that now.
Well, but that same argument now is used for canceling games.
It definitely is. And that's why people want the games canceled, because they would rather get automatic wins.